So, in the chat today, why don't you let us know where you're watching from, what you're doing, what you did for Christmas, that type of stuff while the message is going on. We don't have a host today, so we're each other's hosts. And so basically, if I tell a story, what I need you to do is tell a similar story and make us laugh and make us bond together. And, if we need prayer, then ask for prayer in the chat. You don't have to go into specifics. Just, let's ask each other for prayer this morning. When I was about 10 years old, I went on a river day with my family, and we were skiing, hydro sliding, all kinds of stuff. And my uncle had an awesome boat, and we were having a good time in the boat that day. And I was hydro sliding, and basically I was on a board and I was holding onto the rope, and we were going fast, and then I hit a little pocket, and I fell off the board and let go of the rope and swam over to my board as my uncle is turning around. As I'm holding onto the board, I look over to my left, and about 25 yards away was an alligator swimming by. Let's just say this little 10-year-old kid froze. My good time that I was having with my family turned into terror. And for about 10 seconds, he just swam by me. My uncle was turning around and came to me. And it was nothing. But my good time turned into terror just like that. And life happens that way, doesn't it? We're having a great time, or life is going great. And then all of a sudden, things happen. Things turn. And that's just what happened to a man named Jairus in Mark chapter 5. He was a respected man of the community, and his daughter got sick. Life was going great before then. And all of a sudden, his little girl gets sick. He goes to the doctor, takes her to doctors, and she's growing worse. She's dying. And he hears that Jesus is coming. And he's heard stories about Jesus, that he's healed people. So maybe this is my one shot to turn this thing around. And in Mark chapter 5, verse 21, when Jesus had crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and he pleaded earnestly with him, "My little girl is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd gathered Jesus and pressed in around him. When you're going into 2024, the title of this message is called 3 Things You Need to Know About God. Or maybe, like me, you just forgot. The first thing you need to know about God, or maybe you forgot in 2024, was that Jesus will walk with you. Now picture Jairus. He was a respected man in the community. He was like the principal of a high school. He had no teaching responsibilities, but he was the man in charge. He set the schedule, he took care of the building, he did it all. So he knew what was going on, and he was one of the most respected men in the village. He had heard stories about the crowds coming with Jesus everywhere he went, him healing the sick. But when you're in charge of a building, when you're in charge of the synagogue, large crowds make chaos and makes your job harder. So he had heard about that. But Jesus was his only hope. And he went to him at the shore, and he fell at his feet and says, "Please come, put your hands on my daughter and heal her." Because he had heard the stories. And it's interesting that it's not recorded that Jesus says anything to him. But the only thing that was recorded was Jesus' actions. He just went. He went with him. So this probably made Jairus breathe a little easier. This man who has healed many people is going to my house to heal my little girl. So can you picture it with me? Just use your imagination like I did. Can you imagine that walk? Jairus is talking to Jesus about his little girl, about the first steps that she took, the first time she called him daddy. You know, he was painting a picture of how awesome his little girl was. And Jesus is just listening. He's hanging out, he's having fun. And then something happened that he wasn't expected. And this is point number 2. Though that Jesus will walk with you, He'll do some things that are unplanned. And this is what happens in Mark chapter 5, verse 25. And a woman who was there, who was subject to bleeding for 12 years, she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all that she had. Yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse. This lady had had her monthly period for 12 straight years. And in the Jewish culture, when a lady had her period, she had to stay in her house. She couldn't touch anyone. She couldn't go to worship. She couldn't associate with anybody. She was all alone. All alone. Can you imagine COVID for 12 years? She couldn't go anywhere. She had to stay inside. That's what this lady went through. Think back to COVID. And the text tells us that this woman had some money because she spent everything that she had on many doctors. Many doctors. So she either, her father had money, or she was married and she was married into money. She spent everything. Now she was all alone. Her family had probably abandoned her. Could you imagine her not being able to hang out with her husband for 12 years? And if I would have knew her name, I would tell you. But we're only known by her issue. She is known by the woman with the issue of blood. Can you imagine being known by your issue? Oh, that man's cheap. You know, she's always sick. She's always running her mouth. He's always broke. Being defined by your issues stinks. And her problem consumed her. It swallowed up her identity. Have you ever been so consumed with a problem that's going on in your life that it overtakes your life? That's all you can think about. It overtakes who you are. And I understand that. I'm going through something like that right now. For 20 years I was a student pastor, and I always told my students, every message I preach starts with me, and this message starts with me. Because this woman, she was known for her issue. And when we talk about our issues all the time and we lose sight of who God is, we lose sight of who we are, all we know is the issue at hand. And when we talk about our issues more than we talk about our Savior, we're praising our problems more than our Savior. And this woman is known as the woman with the issue of blood. And she had been sick for 12 years. Remember that. No touching anyone for 12 years. Research shows that if you hug your spouse for 10 seconds a day, it boosts your immune system, eases depression, and reduces fatigue. If you snuggle up to your spouse for another 10 seconds, for 20 seconds, it reduces stress, blood pressure, and your heart rate goes down. And this woman had been alone for 12 years. She had lost everything. She was probably the outcast of her community. You know, the whispers, don't go to that house. That was probably her. When she had heard about Jesus, she came up from behind him and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she had been freed from her suffering. She thought, if I can just touch his clothes, if I can just touch his clothes, I am going to be healed. If I can just touch his clothes, everything's going to be okay, because faith starts at the end of human limitations, and she had nothing left. Nothing left. And what this culture teaches us about this is this weak, sick little woman, pushed her way through a crowd of mainly men. Mainly men, because she had to get to her deliverance. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone from him, and he turned around in the crowd and he asked, "Who touched my clothes?" And as Jesus is wandering around, who touched me? The woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet and trembling with fear. Why was she so afraid? Why was she scared to death? Because of culture. Culture said that she could not touch anyone during her time of the month. And she just pressed through a lot of men to get to them. And then she touched a rabbi, which is a no-no. A sick woman does not touch a rabbi, as Jesus was. So when she came and she fell at Jesus' feet, she was trembling with fear because she thought Jesus was going to punish her. It was culture. And so she started telling him her entire story, the whole truth, all 12 years. If I have to hear, when I ask my wife about her day, I know to set aside about an hour. Can you imagine 12 years? Jesus listened to 12 years. I made the mistake of asking my wife what was for dinner the other day, and she said, I think I was going to make chicken, and then I went to the freezer, and I realized that we didn't have any chicken, so I got in my car, and I went to Publix. I was going to Publix, and I heard on the radio that that chicken was on sale over there, so I passed Publix and I went to Kroger, but I got stuck in traffic, so I called my mom and we were talking about all the stuff we were going to do for Christmas and everything like that, what food we were bringing, when we open presents with the kids and all that. And so then I get to Publix and I'm walking over and I see short ribs are on sale, and I go over to the short rib section. I'm like, do I have time to cook short ribs tonight? And then I saw Miss Nancy and we started talking and things were going great for her. And she was telling me about her Christmas, what her plans were. They're going on a cruise. And Adam, can we please go on a cruise? And so then I decided we're going to go. Then I went over and I got the chicken, came home, I cooked it. I didn't really like it at first. And then I did a couple other things. I made the sides, and now I think I'm ready for the chicken tonight. She could have just said chicken. Chicken. That was it. That was what this woman was going through. 12 years of really not talking to anybody, all by herself. And Jesus is listening to her. He called her back not to mock her, but to listen to her. And what does he call her? He called her the one thing that he didn't call anybody else in the Gospels. He called this woman daughter. He said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." And this was the first time that she probably felt any value in 12 years, because Jesus sat down and listened to her entire story. But for Jairus, this wasn't planned. His plan was to go to the shore, get Jesus, walk to his house, and get his little girl healed. There was to be no stopping. There was to be no stopping. If you've seen the scene in the Chosen series, this scene, They play the Jairus character, and he's waiting patiently. He's crying. He can tell that this is a moment. They make eye contact, and he's just standing. But what if Jairus didn't act that way? I'm not saying that it's wrong, but what happens if he's in his head going, "Why are we stopping? My little girl is sick. I don't have time. She's dying." Because anything that interrupts your plans makes you upset. It aggravates you. When I had plans to go eat and I had to wait for an hour to hear my wife's story, that upset me. This This little girl was dying, and Jairus was trying to get her healed, trying to get her better. Because dads, we want to fix things immediately. We want to fix the problem. When our kids are sick, that's what we want to do, don't we, dads? We want to fix, even though our kids don't want anything to do with us when they're sick. Even when they're older, they want mom. They don't want dad. And maybe in Jairus' mind, he's like, he didn't know that Jesus had unlimited power. What if he was like, what if Jesus used all his power on her instead of my girl? This woman stole my miracle. Are we jealous of people that we think are more blessed than we are? What if that was the case with Jairus? What if that was the case? He's jealous, maybe. Could Jesus have healed his daughter at the shore? Absolutely. Could he have healed the woman and just let her go? Yes. Could he have cut her off at year 6 and said, hey, listen, I've got somewhere else I need to be? Yes, he could have. But he stayed and he listened and he changed the plans of Jairus. Why? That's the question that he was probably asking. Why are we still here? And a lot of us ask, why am I going through what I'm going through? Why am I going through this issue? Because sometimes walking with God is not about the destination. It's about the lessons that we learn along the way. Sometimes he has to close every door for us so we can see him clearly. But we want point A to point B to point C. Sometimes God doesn't work that way. In Genesis, when Abraham was told to sacrifice his son, he could have done it right there. But God tells him to go 3 days. 3 days journey to sacrifice him. Not just in his encampment, but 3 days away. Because sometimes walking with God is not about the destination, it is about the lessons that we learn along the way. Maybe that's why he didn't heal his daughter at the shore. He needed to meet the woman who was at rock bottom. He might have needed Jairus to get to rock bottom, which now it was his turn. While Jesus was still speaking with the woman, some people came from the house of Jairus, said, your daughter is dead. And this is the third thing that you need to know about God, or maybe you just forgot. That God's plans for our lives are much greater than our own plans. So will you trust him? I think when he heard the words, your daughter is dead, all hope was gone. All hope was lost for Jairus. And then they said, why bother the teacher anymore? This was a verbal shot at Jesus. He's not who you said he was, Jairus. He's not who you thought he was. Because if he was who you thought he was, he would have went from the shoreline straight to your house to heal your little girl. So I just wonder what's happening. And if you allow me to use my imagination, does he break down at this moment? Does he begin to weep? His little girl's dead. Does he weep on his friend's shoulder? Or does he be the stoic macho man and he doesn't show any emotion? But at this point, Jesus stands up and he looks Jairus in the eyes. This is the only words recorded in Scripture that Jesus says to Jairus. Don't be afraid. Just believe. It's going to be okay. And I wonder if Jairus is like, what are you talking about? Dead is dead. You're not coming back from dead. Jesus, you've healed people, but you haven't raised anybody up from the dead. Faith starts at the end of human limitations. He hit rock bottom. And when you hit rock bottom, you were just right for God. So maybe that's you at the end of 2024. Maybe you were at rock bottom. Maybe you're there. You're just like Jairus. You're at rock bottom and you've got nothing else. And all Jesus looks at you and says, don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. I'm walking with you. And even though the plans have changed a little bit, I'm still walking beside you. I'm still here. And I wonder if Jesus looks at Jairus and says, you've heard the stories, right? You've heard the stories. I'm still here. And as they're walking to the house, I wonder if Jesus is saying, don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. I wonder if he needs to whisper that into our lives. Adam, don't be afraid, just believe. 2024 has been rough. Don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. Because right now I've got you where I want you. Adam, 2024 is over, is going to end, but I am still here. Maybe that's you. So maybe that's you, and you feel that you're at rock bottom right now. If that is you, get into the chat right now. And all you got to do is say, hey, I'm at rock bottom, and I need prayer. We don't need a host, because all you have to do right now is you pray for each other. If you see somebody in the chat, you can pray right then, or you can type in a little prayer in the chat for them. But let's be a community right now. Whether you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on our website, just get into that chat and just say, hey, I'm at rock bottom and I need your prayers, because I need to trust that I'm not afraid, that I'm just going to believe. Maybe we're having trouble with that. When they came to the house of the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. When he went in, he said to them, why all the commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. And they laughed at him. And after he put them all out, this is my favorite part of this entire story. The words, after he put them all out, is the same verbiage, same language used in John chapter 2 when Jesus cleared the temple, when he physically grabbed people and threw them out windows, whipped them. Jesus cleared the house out. And it wasn't just, hey, can you please leave so I can do a miracle? It was he grabbed them and threw them out. And what in your life, what in my life do we have to, that Jesus has to clear out before he can do a miracle in your life? Because we can't hold on to sin, we can't hold on to doubt and then expect him to do a miracle. So what does he need to take out of your life right now? What does he need to throw out of your life? He took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and he went in to where the child was. And if you allow me to use my imagination again, this is the first time that he sees her lifeless body. And it takes me back to when I saw my son's lifeless body and die. And I remember throwing myself on my son and weeping profusely. And I wonder if Jairus throws himself on his little girl and he's crying. And I wonder if Jesus, as gentle as he was, walks over to this sad, this weeping, this grieving father, and he puts his hand on his shoulders and he pulls him up and he says, don't be afraid, just believe. Do you trust me, Jairus? Do you trust me, Jairus? I've walked with you this entire time and I'm still here. And he took her by the hand and he said, Talitha koum, which means, little girl, get up. And suddenly, and immediately, the girl stood up. Funeral over. I wonder if the reason that Jesus didn't want to heal his little girl at the shoreline was that he had a bigger plan in mind. It was something for Jesus to heal a little girl and not even see her. He's done it. But what was a bigger miracle? The healing of a sick girl or raising to life of a dead girl? Jesus had bigger things in mind, and he has bigger things in mind for you. The struggles that you're going through, they're there. The dreams that you had that you thought that are gone, Jesus has a bigger plan for you. He has bigger dreams for you than you could ever imagine. And you see, this little walk with Jesus, this wasn't just an afternoon. This was the rest of Jairus' life. Because when he saw his little girl graduate from college, he remembered this day that she was dead, and he remembered the walk with Jesus. When she got married and he walked her down the aisle, he remembered this day with Jesus. When he held his first grandbaby, he remembered the journey and the day that Jesus changed his life forever. The journey with Jesus will last the rest of your life, but you have to know, or you need to remember in 2025 that Jesus will walk with you. He will. Even when things happen that are not planned, he is walking with you through the unplanned things. And that his dream and his plans for your life is bigger than what you haven't planned in your life. But the final question that you have to ask yourself in all of that and remind yourself is, will you trust him? So as we go back into singing the song Holy Forever,